A Roman soldier was not created on the battlefield. He was constructed long before the first spear was raised. Rome did not rely on raw bravery or personal heroics. It relied on psychological conditioning. The Roman army understood something many civilizations missed. Fear is inevitable, but behavior can be controlled. A Roman recruit entered the army as a citizen or subject, but that identity was intentionally dismantled. Personal markers, distinct clothing, individual weapons, even personal decision-making were stripped away and replaced with standardized armor, shields, formations, and commands. This uniformity was not merely logistical efficiency, it was psychological design. By erasing visible and behavioral differences, Rome reduced self-awareness in combat. A soldier who does not stand out does not hesitate to protect himself at the expense of the group. The individual ego was weakened so the collective ego could dominate. This process aligns with what modern psychology defines as de-individuation, a state in which self-identity is submerged into group identity, reducing fear of judgment and personal consequence. In battle, this allowed Roman soldiers to act without internal debate. They did not evaluate danger through a personal lens. Will I survive? Will I be injured? But through a collective one. Is the line holding? The shield wall did not belong to one man. It belonged to Rome. Breaking formation was not just a tactical failure, it was a psychological betrayal of identity. Over time, the soldier's sense of self fused entirely with the unit. Loyalty shifted away from family, tribe, or personal survival toward the cohort and legion. This made retreat psychologically difficult, even when physically possible. To flee meant losing oneself entirely: status, honor, belonging. In this way, Rome weaponized identity itself. The soldier did not fight as an individual defending his life. He fought as a component preserving a system in which his only remaining sense of worth existed. Rome never attempted to eliminate fear from its soldiers, because fear is biologically unavoidable. Instead, it reorganized fear into a controlled hierarchy. A Roman soldier feared punishment from his own command more than the enemy in front of him. Disobedience, cowardice, or breaking formation carried consequences that were immediate, public, and severe. These punishments were not arbitrary acts of cruelty. They were consistent and predictable. Psychological stability in extreme situations comes from knowing outcomes in advance, even when those outcomes are harsh. By making internal discipline more threatening than external danger, Rome redirected fear inward, away from panic and toward compliance. The enemy represented uncertainty, unknown weapons, tactics, and intentions. Roman authority represented certainty. When fear peaked in battle, the soldier's mind gravitated toward the safer psychological option, following orders. Obedience became a coping mechanism. In this way, fear did not paralyze the Roman soldier. It disciplined him, channeling survival instincts into controlled collective action rather than individual flight. Roman training was built around repetition to the point of mental saturation. Marching for hours under heavy load, constructing camps every night regardless of exhaustion, and drilling the same combat movements endlessly were not meant to inspire toughness alone. They were designed to shift behavior from conscious choice to automatic execution. Under extreme stress, the human brain loses its ability to reason clearly. Rome anticipated this failure and replaced thinking with habit. When fear disrupted higher cognition, trained routines took control. This reliance on procedural memory gave Roman soldiers a psychological advantage in chaos. A man did not need to evaluate his surroundings or interpret complex commands. His body already knew what to do. Shield up, step forward, hold the line. Routine acted as mental insulation, reducing panic by narrowing focus to familiar actions. In battle, where unpredictability overwhelms the mind, repetition created stability. The Roman soldier survived not by reacting creatively, but by repeating what had already been carved into him through discipline. The Roman army removed environmental uncertainty wherever possible, even in hostile territory. Every marching day followed a predictable rhythm: movement, labor, rest, guard duty. More importantly, every camp was constructed using the same layout, dimensions, and defensive logic. Streets, gates, command tents, and sleeping quarters were always placed in familiar positions. This consistency was not convenience, it was psychological stabilization. Familiar environments reduce cognitive stress, allowing the mind to conserve energy for threat response rather than orientation. By imposing order on foreign landscapes, Rome created a sense of dominance before battle even began. Chaos weakens morale. Structure reinforces control. The camp functioned as a mental reset, signaling to the soldier that Rome still governed his world, regardless of distance from home. Inside the walls, anxiety diminished, routines resumed, and identity was reinforced. The camp was not merely a shelter from attack, it was a controlled psychological space that prevented fear from accumulating and eroding discipline over time. Roman honor was engineered to function as a social control mechanism rather than a personal virtue. Recognition, promotions, and decorations were granted publicly, reinforcing the idea that worth was measured by visible contribution to the unit. Likewise, shame was deliberately exposed. Cowardice, failure, or disobedience were remembered and shared, ensuring that reputational consequences extended beyond the battlefield. This created constant social pressure, where every soldier was aware that his actions would be judged not privately, but permanently. This system transformed peers into psychological enforcers. A Roman soldier was rarely alone in his fear because he was always under observation. The anticipation of collective judgment became a stronger motivator than abstract loyalty to Rome itself. Retreat meant more than survival, it meant social erasure. Honor, in this context, was not about glory, it was about belonging. By tying identity to reputation within the group, Rome ensured that soldiers fought not to achieve greatness, but to avoid becoming a permanent stain on the memory of their unit. Roman military culture deliberately stripped violence of emotional meaning. Soldiers were not encouraged to hate the enemy, seek revenge, or act out of personal anger. Emotional intensity was seen as destabilizing. It narrowed judgment and broke formation discipline. Instead, violence was framed as the execution of a role assigned by the state. Roman soldier did not feel his way through combat, he performed it. Killing was not an expression of passion, but a task completed under authority. This framing created psychological distance between the soldier and his actions. By separating duty from emotion, Rome reduced hesitation and long-term mental conflict. The soldier did not evaluate the morality of each act in the moment. That responsibility was transferred upward to command and law. This compartmentalization allowed soldiers to function repeatedly in violent environments without paralysis or collapse. Violence became procedural, regulated, limited, and controlled, ensuring that the mind remained stable even when the actions themselves were extreme. Roman command structures were designed to provide mental stability under pressure. Officers positioned themselves where they could be seen, not hidden behind the lines. Visibility mattered. In moments of fear, the human mind looks for cues of control. Seeing commanders calm, present, and issuing clear orders signaled that the situation was still manageable. Authority acted as an anchor, preventing panic from spreading through uncertainty. Orders themselves were intentionally simple. Roman commands avoided complexity, emotional language, or improvisation in battle. This reduced cognitive load at the moment when mental capacity was most limited. Soldiers were not asked to interpret intent or adapt independently, they were asked to execute. By centralizing decision-making and distributing execution, Rome ensured that psychological strain remained concentrated at the top, while the rank and file operated within clear, narrow expectations that preserved cohesion under stress. Roman military culture treated death as an expected operational outcome, not a heroic climax. Soldiers were conditioned to see casualties as part of function rather than tragedy. This normalization reduced shock and emotional overload during combat. When a man fell, the immediate psychological response was not grief, but adjustment. Close the gap, maintain formation, continue forward. By removing emotional emphasis from death, Rome prevented individual loss from destabilizing collective action. This approach also protected long-term morale. Glorifying death creates unrealistic expectations and psychological dissonance when survival, not sacrifice, becomes the goal. Rome instead rewarded endurance, discipline, and effectiveness. A soldier's value lay in how long and how reliably he could function. Death was acknowledged, recorded, and honored later, but never allowed to interrupt the moment. In doing so, Rome preserved mental continuity on the battlefield, ensuring that emotion never outweighed order.